I never expected my brother's celebration to turn into a heartbreaking revelation. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air hung thick with anticipation. Laughter danced through the room, mingling with the scent of freshly baked cookies. But beneath the surface, shadows lurked. My brother, Aaron, stood at the center like a king, his smile blinding and infectious. Everyone adored him. Friends gathered, all buzzing with excitement, yet an undercurrent of dread gnawed at me. Why would a cheerful day feel so heavy? My heart raced, echoing the rhythm of the music throbbing against the walls. Mysterious whispers floated around. I caught snippets of conversations that fell awkwardly between excitement and concern. Have you talked to him lately? I don't think he's been himself. My eyes darted to Aaron, whose laughter rang out melodically, but there was something fragile beneath it. His best friend, Jake, stood too close, his eyes darting around nervously. I could see the flicker of fear in his posture, arms crossed tightly against his chest. I squeezed my hands, feeling the heat rise in my throat. Something was off. My mom poured drinks, her hands trembled slightly, a crack in her smile revealed worry behind her bright facade. As the chaos around me continued, balloons popped, party hats flew, I felt the walls close in. The music faded to a dull thrum. Every heartbeat echoed louder. And then it happened. Just as Aaron raised his glass for a toast, a heavy silence sank over the room. All eyes turned to the door, where a figure stood silhouetted against the light. I need to talk to you, Aaron, the stranger said. My stomach dropped. The room blurred, whispers filled the air. Who was this person? The tone was serious, a storm brewing in their eyes. I felt a shiver ripple down my spine. Aaron's face crumbled. Not now, he pleaded, but his voice trembled. Shock stretched across the faces around me. I glanced at Jake, his eyes wide, mouth agape. My heart pounded, threatening to burst. What secret was unraveling? Tension electrified the atmosphere, heartbeats synced in a deafening rhythm of confusion. I could barely breathe. My world felt tilted. The stranger stepped inside, and dread enveloped us all. Was this the surprise we were never meant to see? Just as Aaron opened his mouth, ready to reveal whatever darkness hovered over him, the lights flickered ominously. Everything froze. A pause saturated with questions lingered in the air. Silence weighed down every person in the room, each of us holding our breath, fearing the worst. What truth was about to shatter our lives? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air was thick with an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread as the tension in the room wrapped itself around each of us like a suffocating blanket. I could see the confusion on most faces, each one reflecting the same questions simmering in my mind. Who was this stranger, and what did they know about Aaron that we didn't? The lights flickered again, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, momentarily draping our celebration in a shroud of darkness. In that split second, I saw Aaron's eyes dart from the stranger to the growing crowd, gauging the weight of our unasked questions. He looked trapped, a marionette tangled in strings he no longer wanted to follow. Aaron, just hear me out, the stranger urged, stepping further into the room. Their face, now illuminated, mirrored anguish lines etched deep, suggesting familiarity, but I couldn't place them. I could only think of how Aaron was slowly losing himself, retreating behind walls head built for protection. I felt an instinctive need to protect him. My heart raced. I wanted to rush in, demand answers, tell this intruder to live up to the role of a big sister. But my feet were glued to the floor, paralyzed by uncertainty. I clutched Aunt Mary's old, frayed bracelet on my wrist, a talisman of sorts I had worn to ward off apprehension. Aaron? Jake's voice cut through the thick silence, trembling like a leaf caught in an autumn wind. What's going on? The question hung heavily in the air, heavy enough to crush the fragile laughter that had filled the space just moments ago. I looked to Aaron, desperation swelling in my chest. I needed him to be okay. Just a few days prior, we had sat together on the porch, reminiscences woven into comfortable silence. I'd noticed how his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, shadows pooling where light should have danced. But he hadn't wanted to talk then. Aaron, please. His friend's voice broke over the gathering storm. We all care about you. Suddenly, the stranger stepped closer, awkwardly breaking the invisible barrier surrounding Aaron. I came here to help. You don't have to face this alone. I could feel the weight of their gaze, like the touch of ice across Aaron's skin. For a moment, I waited for him to shake off the unease, to tell everyone it was just a misunderstanding, that he was fine. But as the seconds ticked by, his silence loomed like an impending storm. The party, once filled with joyous revelry, felt eerily quiet. Guests whispered among themselves, their voices a chorus of curiosity peppered with concern. I turned to my mother, who stood frozen, drink in hand, eyes glistening with unshed tears. For an agonizing moment, I thought she might crumble, but then she took a deep breath, gathering the strength that had always characterized her. Aaron, she spoke softly, her voice steadier than I felt. If you're struggling, please let us help you. Her words pierced the thick tension enveloping us, and I saw a flicker in Aaron's eyes, a realization of the support that surrounded him. Just for an instant, it felt as if the world had paused, waiting for him to break free from the chains of silence, but then, in a heartbreaking twist, his expression shifted. It darkened, shoulders slumping as if a weight heavier than any I could imagine had settled upon him. You don't understand, he choked out, and I could see the pain radiating from him, raw and unnerving. You're right. I haven't been, myself. But I can't tell you. I can't. Why not? I blurted out, desperate and scared, every instinct pushing me to reach out. You're my brother, Aaron. I'm here for you. We all are. His gaze flickered towards me, and in that moment, I saw not just his pain but the flicker of guilt that intertwined with a battle between the love he felt for us and the darkness swallowing him whole. Just as he seemed ready to speak, a chill swept through the room. The door swung open again, revealing a familiar figure with a pale complexion, Sarah, our childhood neighbor, who had moved away years ago. What's happening? She asked, breathless and wide-eyed. My heart plummeted. Why was she here? Her return, after all this time, felt like an omen. As if sensing the shift in the air, her eyes landed on Aaron, and panic ignited the tension that already filled the room. The moment teetered on the brink of revelation, the air electric with unsaid words. What new challenge had just stepped into our chaos? As I grasped my brother's hand, I wondered if we had strayed too far down this path of shadows to find our way back into the light. What was about to unfold would test our bonds in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. And just like that, I felt a voicey whisper of hope. But the dread still lingered, an unyielding presence waiting just outside the door of our unraveling reality. The room held its breath, caught between the familiar warmth of celebration and the impending chill of turmoil. Sarah stood like a specter, her wide eyes darting from Aaron to the stranger, and then to the crowd that was inexplicably hushed. The familiarity of her presence drew a veil over the rising tension, yet my pulse quickened. Why now? After all these years, why had she returned at this moment, Aaron? Sarah finally breathed, her voice trembling as though she were grasping at threads of a memory long forgotten. I heard. I didn't know you were going through this. His gaze dropped, the tumult of emotions swirling behind his quiet facade rendering him frozen. For an agonizing moment, it was as though time itself had buckled, trapping us in this fragile web of shared histories and unspoken truths. Who is she? Jake whispered, breaking the silence, his eyes darting between everyone. The question felt electric, igniting whispered conversations among our guests, as fabrications and fears alike spun out of control. She's a friend from Aaron started, but my heart raced, apprehension flooding my senses. Would he tell them the truth? The truth about everything? The stranger shifted, their brow knitted tight. Aaron, we don't have time for this. You need to confront the truth. Not just to your family but to yourself. Stop. I interjected, feeling my hands tremble, necessity mingling with desperation. Whatever this is, whatever you think you know, it's all too much. My voice wavered, and I fought to regain my balance, glancing around the room at the faces of those I loved. They were waiting, and I felt the pressure of their expectation crushing down. Something is wrong, Sarah pressed, her voice laced with urgency. You can't keep hiding. Please, Aaron. In that moment, I was swept into a tempest of emotion as Aaron's eyes met mine. Waves of hurt washed over his features, darkened by the shadows of something that lingered just beyond the edge of his grasp. I reached out again, my fingers brushing against his. Please, talk to me. The crowd shifted, restless, the atmosphere thickening into a suffocating fog of frustration. Everyone was just a heartbeat away from believing something grave lay beneath the surface of our laughter. Aaron stood there as a storm in a glass bottle, ready to explode, and my breath quickened. Can't, he choked out finally, voice breaking as tears pooled in the corners of his eyes, sparkling like shards of glass. I don't want you to know. Suddenly, the stranger stepped forward again, eyes wide, sincerity etched into their features. What's more dangerous, Aaron? Knowing the truth or hiding from it? I watched as the flicker of battle ignited within my brother, one that swirled between anguish and desperation. And just when I thought he might finally found his voice, the house phone rang, a shrill note slicing through the delicate tension like a knife. As if drawn by unseen threads, we all turned toward the sound. I watched as Mom took a tentative step towards the phone, her face paling as she answered the call. The room froze as her stunned expression morphed into fear. What do you mean? She whispered, voice trembling on the edge of panic. Aaron, she breathed, my heart pounding to echoes of dread. It's about his health. A sharp intake of breath cascaded through the room like rippling waves, the weight of those words sinking deep into the earth beneath us. Darkness skittered at the edges of my vision, creeping into the light. I clutched the bracelet tighter, visions of laughter and sunny days morphing into dread. I felt my knees shake, panic rising like bile in my throat as I turned back to Aaron. Mom, what are you saying? I risked a step closer to her, where reality felt fuzzy, the air thickening as uncertainty swirled. My brother's gaze was a mirror reflecting despair, and in the sinking pit of my stomach, I knew we stood on the precipice of uncharted waters. They have news about Aaron's test results. They weren't normal. The revelation hung like a shadow between us, an uninvited prophecy hovering over our fragile foundations. In that instant, I saw hope shatter, scattering on the floor like fragile glass. Looking at Aaron, I wanted to scream, to pull everything into focus, to grab hold of the moment and shake it until everything made sense. Before I could articulate my thoughts, before I could ask him what was wrong, the air shifted, as if the universe leaned closer to hear our hearts tremble. He met my gaze, eyes wide, and in that moment, I realized I was looking at something deeper than fear. That I was staring into a chasm of secrets. The walls of our lives, our shared past, wavered and warped, revealing a truth bubbling beneath the surface, waiting. The moment was electric, carrying a current that charged my skin. This was no longer just about revelation, it was about survival, about holding tightly to the shards of hope that were soon to be tested. As my mother hung up the phone, a quiet dread set lead, a gentle hand closing around my heart as panic lay curled within the confines of my chest. I glanced at Sarah and the trembling stranger, then back at Aaron. His face was drained of all color, and in the charged air, a call echoed, a plea for answers in the heart of our chaos, but all I felt was the slow quiet of inevitability swirling around us, threatening to pull us into the abyss. I had to know, but did I truly want the answers that lay just beyond reach? The room shimmered with fading lights, yet the glow felt hollow. Conversations ebbed away as the weight of my mother's words lingered, suffocating in its gravity. My mind raced through a kaleidoscope of emotions, fear, confusion, a creeping sense of doom that settled into my bones. Aaron's face, pale and taut, bore an imprint of something he could no longer keep hidden. I glanced at the guests, their laughter fading like echoes in an empty hall, leaving only the haunting silence of shared vulnerability. No one had expected to kneel, metaphorically, before a greater truth tonight. The celebratory spirit had unraveled, and I felt the thread of our lives twist tighter around our throats. In that stillness, I saw the flicker of a single candle dancing defiantly against the darker reminder of everything we were risking. Sarah's eyes, wide and shimmering with empathy, met mine. "You need to take him aside," she whispered, as if voicing a prayer. I nodded, and with every step toward Aaron, I felt the world shift beneath my feet. "Aaron," I said softly, my voice a thin veil over a churning tide of emotions, "we need to talk." He barely acknowledged me, his gaze locked onto the floor, as if searching for answers in the wood grain. "What's there to say?" The tremor in his voice revealed his internal storm, a battle raging just beneath the surface. "Aaron, please, what's wrong? You can't keep this from us." It felt like an act of desperation to reach for him, to pull him back from the ledge he was teetering on. He finally looked up, his expression a mosaic of fear and regret. "I can't," he whispered, the pain in his voice fracturing my heart. "I don't want to burden you." "Burden? Aaron, we're family. Whatever it is, we will fight it together." I reached out, clutching his hand, an anchor in tumultuous seas, willing him to see the glimmer of hope wrapped in solidarity. A sudden crash of laughter penetrated the frail bubble we were enveloped in, reminding us of the celebration that had so quickly devolved into something unrecognizable. "You can't protect us from the truth by keeping it buried," I insisted, battling the dread that nipped at the edges of my sanity. That he squeezed my hand back, just slightly, as if clinging to a lifeline. "It's not just about me," his voice trailed off, loaded with unspoken weight. A shift in the crowd drew my attention. The stranger, who still hovered at the edge of our storm, had stepped forward, their expression earnest and resolute. "You can't face this alone, Aaron," they reiterated, and I was taken aback by the intensity of their sincerity. "You have to share your burdens. There's always light through the darkness." "Who are you?" I found myself asking, confusion mingling with frustration. "What do you even know about us?" "I am someone who understands that fear festers in silence," the stranger replied, their gaze locking on Aaron with a fierce compassion. "You have a chance to break the cycle now, to rewrite how this unfolds for yourself and for those you love. But only if you let them in." "Rewriting doesn't change the reality of this moment," Aaron muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, yet laced with deep sorrow. The honesty in his confession hit something primal within me, like a load weight that sank further into my heart. I had felt the sharp sting of secrets buried long ago when Aaron and I lost our father, the shadow that hovered relentlessly over us since. But now, the stakes felt even higher. "Whatever this is, Aaron, we're not walking away," I asserted, my voice simmering with conviction. "You must trust us." Tears threatened to spill from his eyes, mingling with the unspoken fear that cast a pall over his features. "What if it's too much?" "I can't change what is." The tests they showed something, he faltered, swallowing hard as the reality of his unyielding truth loomed larger than life. "It's okay," I soothed, my voice thinning as panic clawed at me, aware of the chaos raging beyond our small bubble of honesty. "Just say it." There was a pause, and for the first time, the tremor in his hands became apparent. A day spent buried in fear now igniting an urgent sense of vulnerability. I might. Before he could finish, an insistent knock echoed from the front door, startling us as we turned. The moment felt shattered, the fragile thread of our connection fraying as chaos reclaimed its hold. I felt the incredulity bloom within me. Could possibly be more alarming than this? I stepped back, the weight of the world on my shoulders as the stranger moved to answer the door, revealing a figure silhouetted by the harsh outdoor light. Familiar yet foreign, a shadow from our past stepped into the light. "Can't you see he needs help?" The newcomer bellowed, their voice tinged with anger and intensity that sent shivers racing down my spine. I recoiled as every fiber of my being recognized our estranged uncle, who had vanished from our lives after the tragedy of our father's passing. A verse of history had returned to shake the foundations of our already crumbling world. "Who invited you?" I whispered, caught in a breathless mix of dread and disbelief, unsure whether to embrace the echoes of a long-buried past or bristle against the impending storm of their return. Aaron's body was a statue of rigid tension, and in that instant, I resolved to stand stronger than ever. The air thickened with the promise of an upheaval. Answers felt crucial now, yet so dangerous. The truth loomed over us, somber and foretold. What would it take to finally confront it? As uncertainty coiled tighter around us, a single thought crashed through my mind: would the truth bind us together or tear us apart? The chaos of the moment crashed into us like a wave, and for a heartbeat, I could hardly breathe. My uncle, the ghost of past grievances, loomed in the doorway, his presence an electric shock to a world that had already turned upside down. I felt the tension in Aaron, his hand slipping from mine, and I instantly regretted it. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with an emotion I couldn't quite name, part anger, part fear of the memories he might unleash. "Because it's time you knew the truth," he spat, stepping into the room with an aggression that sent the laughter of the guests spiraling into distant echoes. "And because you," he pointed an accusatory finger at Aaron, "are on the brink of repeating history." Aaron faltered, confusion swirling in his eyes. "What history?" he asked, but even as he spoke, I could see the realization dawning, a terrible knowledge that had been lurking in the corners of his mind like a long-forgotten nightmare. The stranger beside Uswo had earlier urged Aaron to share his burdens remained silent, their fiery determination dimmed by the shadow of our uncle now filling the narrow room. Instead, I felt a strange flicker of warmth wash over me, the kind you get when a stranger suddenly decides to defend you, and a desperate, primal instinct to protect Aaron bubbled up within me. "Whatever you think you know," I retorted, "you have no right to just barge in here and I'm going to share everything that's been kept from you," he interrupted, advancing further, his voice lowering to an ominous whisper. "You're not the only one who bears a legacy of pain." There was a heavy silence as we absorbed his words, and for a moment I felt suspended in time, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. I looked back at Aaron, who seemed to shrink into himself, his fears manifesting in that very moment when confronted with a man he had long considered a villain in our family story. "Just tell us," Aaron implored, his voice breaking. "What do you know?" Our uncle smirked, and it felt like a blade being twisted in old wounds. "I know that this disease runs in our family," he revealed, and the second those words left his lips, I felt the air grow heavy. "Your father was hiding it. That's why he left. That's why he couldn't stand the thought of what would happen to you." The world around me trembled, and I caught Sarah's eye, her face pale under the weight of revelations yet to come. "Disease?" I echoed, the word tasting foreign and bitter. "What are you talking about?" Aaron's face paled, cracking under the pressure of a different kind of fear. "What disease? It's genetic," our uncle pressed, and here, in this moment stained with uncertainty, the pieces began falling into place, as dark and twisted as they were. "You need to test for it." I thought I had escaped its grasp, but your father stopped, biting back his anger. "Your father hid it, just like he hid from us." Suddenly, the anger in me flared. "You don't know anything," I shouted, but it felt futile against the storm that had gathered. "He is gone. This isn't a time for blame. This is exactly the time for blame." He shot back, his fury igniting hot and wild. "You need to wake up to the truth, or you'll find yourselves lost in the same darkness your father fell into." "Enough," I cried, feeling fractured between anger and sorrow, longing to shield my brother from this tidal wave of uncertainty crushing the air from his lungs. I reached for Aaron, squeezing his shoulder, reminding him he wasn't alone in this, that distancing himself from the truth wouldn't change its reality, but in that moment, everything cracked wide open. Aaron's eyes strayed to the ground, filled with an unbearable knowledge he was terrified to articulate. "So he was sick." "You think I'm sick?" "Your father fought it until the end," our uncle pressed, desperation clawing at his voice. "And all this time, I thought I could protect you. But keeping secrets doesn't shield you. You need to know the truth about who you are." "No. I don't want to hear any more," Aaron shouted back, anguish and confusion coiling around him like chains. "You're not going to take me down that path, too." His outburst hung heavy in the air between us, and I wanted to scream for him to stop fighting, but all I could do was watch as the maelstrom of our past began swallowing us whole, and then just as abruptly, the strange, steadfast individual who had entered our lives stood up and, with poise, challenged our uncle. "Your anger won't help him," they said quietly yet firmly, directing their gaze to Aaron. "You don't have to go through this alone. Together, we can find ways to face what's coming." The unexpected kindness was a fragile thread stretched amid the echoes of hurting. I turned to Aaron, my heart echoing in sync with his rapid breaths. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. I promise." but in the moment of silent connection, a profound question tore through the atmosphere. What if the truth they feared actually broke us apart, rather than bond us together? What if the heartbreak they had suffered had now come back to claim another generation? Just then, a text notification dinged on my phone, breaking the heavy silence. The urgency of it caused me to check, the unsettling feeling looming larger than ever. It was a message from Mom. I need to talk. Now that I could feel the air turn electric, another storm looming on the horizon. As I looked back at Aaron, his face reflected the terror of facing an impending moment that could change everything or unravel it all. The air thickened with tension, and I felt like a candle flickering in a relentless storm, balanced precariously on the edge of remembrance and revelation. I turned to my phone, the stark screen lighting up with my mother's urgent message. My heart sank further into my chest. It was like the universe itself was positioning us for yet another blow, and I didn't know how much more either of us could take. "Mom?" I murmured, half expecting her voice to echo in the stillness of the room, but it didn't. The silence enveloped us. Aaron still stood to my side, his stare vacant, fixed somewhere beyond my shoulder. I could see the gears turning in his mind, and I knew he was grappling with the insidious whispers of uncertainty that now permeated the very air around us. I squeezed his arm, a silent plea that seemed far too feeble against the enormity of this moment. "Let's step outside," I suggested hurriedly, desperation mingling with hope as I glanced at our uncle. His expression was a tumult of self-satisfaction and fleeting remorse. It disgusted me. No. Aaron snapped, his voice a raw edge of fear. "I don't want to hear from anyone right now." I took half a step toward him, positioning myself between Aaron and our uncle as if my presence could shield him from the hereditary fear now tangled in our veins. "We have to," I shot back, my voice more insistent this time. "Whatever is going on with Mom, she might know more about what our uncle is saying. We have to understand. We can't bury our heads in the sand." He looked at me, his eyes flickering flames of anger and vulnerability. "But what if it crushes us? What if it's there, right?" What if his words hung there, limp with uncertainty, and at that moment, I saw the trembling of a boy I once knew, the one whose laughter had once had the power to lift everyone around him. This situation was a time capsule of childhood innocence, now so heavy with expectation and despair that it felt like the past was pressing down on us. "Aaron, please," I said, pushing down the looming dread threatening to engulf me. "We can't run from this. It'll find us. We need to face it together." The tension snapped when our uncle maintained his cold facade. "Don't let your sister talk you into hiding, Aaron. You need to wake up. The truth is brutal, but it's better than the lies that will entrap you. As if propelled by some cosmic force, I turned sharply to our uncle, anger shooting through me like electricity. "You're the one hiding behind bitterness and blame. You don't get to lecture us about truth when you've been a stranger for so long." Silence fell again, but this time it felt slightly different. There was something fragile yet fierce in that brief moment, an understanding glowing like embers just above ashes. Then the stranger who had joined us unexpectedly moved closer to Aaron, a gentle hand placed on his back, soothing yet firm. "You're not alone, I promise you. No matter what you learn today, you will not face it without support," they vowed, and although I barely knew this person, I felt grateful for their kindness. I sighed, feeling the warmth of their words and the gentle connection flowing between us. It was small but significant, like fresh spring water amidst a long drought. In a world that felt so cold and severe, these small acts of empathy began to seem essential. "Aaron, I believe we can face it," I reiterated, feeling a shard of determination shift within me. "Let's go find Mom and hear what she needs to tell us. Whatever it is, I'm right by your side. You don't have to carry this burden alone." Just as I thought we were making headway, a sudden loud crash resonated from the living room, breaking our fragile moment of resolve. My heart raced, the sound was sharp, searing through tensions like a knife. "Come on," I shouted, taking Aaron's hand forcefully and pulling him toward the doorway. As we stepped out, the gathering storm of voices grew louder, panic swirling amid the huddled guests. It felt like the world was breaking apart again as I led Aaron through the crowd, searching for the source of the chaos and the chaotic drama. I caught a glimpse of our neighbor, Mrs. Featherstone, her eyes wide with alarm and disbelief. "It's just, oh my God," she stuttered, her breath hitching. You have to see, but before she could finish, someone else shouted, "Call 911." The horror painted across the faces of those around us bubbled with a terror that made my chest feel tight and small. That we turned our gaze toward the center of the commotion. And then I froze, there, sprawled across the floor, a familiar shape, me mother. Her face a ghostly pale, eyes fluttering like those of a bird caught in a snare. The chaos unfolded around her, but she seemed trapped in a moment of time, fragile yet powerful, an unspoken message etched on her pale lips. That flush of horror, as the world around me spun in deafening chaos, I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble dangerously. What did this mean? What truth was about to shatter the last pieces of our already fractured reality? As I clutched Aaron's hand tighter, panic coursing through my veins, I knew we were on the brink of a revelation that could unravel everything we thought we understood. Amid the chaos, time slowed as if the universe held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Aaron's grip around my hand tightened as we pushed through the dense mass of bodies. I could feel the frantic beating of my heart against the stark silence that hung heavy in the air, thickening like molasses. "Mom!" I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. It was as if my voice created a fissure in the world around me, drawing attention to the crumpled figure on the floor. We reached her just as someone kneeled beside her, a stranger, voice urgent, yet calm. "Ma'am, can you hear me? You need to stay still." The deliberate composure contrasted sharply with the frantic movement of others, who milled about not knowing how to help. I sank to my knees beside her, the coolness of the floor sending shockwaves through my system. "Mom! Please, you have to wake up." Panic resonated in every syllable, an echo of emotions flooding my chest, each wave threatening to drown me. I brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, the touch both familiar and terrifying in its unsettling normalcy. "Someone get a blanket." Someone barked, and I looked up to see anxious faces pressed close, twisted in concern. But in that moment, all I cared about was the waning light in my mother's eyes. The soft, steady rhythm of her breath was my only anchor in the chaos. "Hang in there, Mom," I whispered, feeling the warmth of tears gather at the edge of my lashes, blurring my vision. A supportive hand rested on my shoulder, the stranger from earlier. The kindness radiated even amidst the rising panic, and I took a steadying breath, allowing that small flicker of hope to tether me. "Mom," Aaron's voice broke, trembling as he knelt on the other side, mirroring my desperation. "I'm here." His whispered assurance seemed to create an invisible thread between them, binding our hearts even as fear threatened to snuff out that light. The sound of sirens began to weave itself into the cacophony of chaos, a haunting yet welcome reminder that help was on its way. I closed my eyes momentarily, imagining the warmth of my mother's embrace reassuring us, as it always had. But dread gnawed at the edges of that cherished memory, whispering tales of potential loss in the back of my mind. As the paramedics arrived, a new wave of intensity swept through the crowd. Their sharp voices cut through the noise as they worked efficiently, assessing the situation, all while we hovered like ghosts, spectators to our mother's fragile state. "Let us through," one of them commanded, and I instinctively rose, shifting aside with Aaron. The world narrowed, the chaos muted, as our reality clamped down around us once again. Do you know what happened? Aaron turned to me, his eyes wide and watery, desperate for answers. I shook my head, feeling the darkness of uncertainty pool ever deeper. Moments felt like hours as the paramedics worked, our mother's pallor stark against the dim light of the living room. I could faintly hear fragments of conversations, their assessments, murmurs of distress. I wanted to scream, to demand they do something more, make her wake up, make it all go back to normal. Then, less than a heartbeat later, one of the paramedics looked directly at us, and the world fell away. "We're going to need to stabilize her before we can move her," he said, his voice professional but laced with emotion. "Why? What's wrong with her?" Aaron's voice strained with fear. "We suspect it may be a stroke." Their words fell like heavy stones into a quiet pool, rippling out into every corner of my mind. The air thickened again, this time with suffocating dread. A stroke? The word echoed, chipping away at the fragments of my shattered reality. My mother, once so vibrant, now diminished to this delicate shell. I turned, seeking solace in Aaron's eyes, but found only a reflection of my own terror. "It could be okay," I managed, grasping for hope, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "She'll pull through, she has to." His expression darkened, a storm brewing in the depths of his gaze. What if she doesn't? He whispered, choking on a possibility that loomed larger than both of us could bear. A paramedic called for us to step back, pulling Aaron and me from our spiraling thoughts, and for the briefest fraction of a moment, I felt his hands slip from mine as they lifted her onto a stretcher. Panic surged, and I grabbed hold of his arm again, hardly aware of how loud my heart pounded in my ears. Don't let go, I begged quietly, my breath hitching. That he nodded, though shadows of doubt crawled into the corners of his eyes. I want. As they wheeled our mother away, I took a desperate breath. The hallway stretched before us like an unwelcome void, an abyss that threatened to consume every ounce of our warmth. It was then that a disturbing thought began to claw at the edges of my mind. What if there was more to this? The unusual message Mom had sent earlier, the strange urgency in her voice. What burden could have been heavy enough to bring her to this point? Wait. I called out suddenly, my voice piercing through the tense air, startling the nearest paramedic. What? He turned, a mix of frustration and concern etching his features. Was she lucid before? Did she say anything? The paramedic paused, a flicker of something brewing behind his eyes, then he shook his head. She was unresponsive when we arrived. My heart sank further, and as the stretcher disappeared down the corridor, I felt the bitter taste of uncertainty wrap its tendrils around my soul. There were secrets hidden beneath the surface that I had yet to unearth, and as the weight of impending revelation settled heavily within, I steeled myself for the battles yet to come. And somewhere, in the shadows of that uncertainty, I could feel something looming, something more than our mother's fragile state, connecting us to a darkness that was only just beginning to unfold. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, each breath a reminder of the sterile reality we were up against. I blinked back fresh tears as we stood in the dimly lit waiting room, the anxious silence surrounding us muffled by our thoughts. I felt like a marionette with cut strings, hanging between grief and hope, oscillating with every heartbeat that echoed against the plaster walls. Aaron slouched beside me, his fingers nervously drumming against his knee. I wanted to reach out, to take his hand and anchor him as he had done for me moments before, but a chasm of uncertainty seeped between us. Words hesitated on my lips, and in the stillness of that room, the unspoken dread loomed larger, the weight felt endless. Each tick of the clock combined with the wretched ache of time's insensitivity gnawed at my insides. When a nurse finally emerged, her glimmering name badge momentarily distracted us from our worry, but the faint smile that draped her features quickly faded, replaced by a seriousness that made my heart plunge. Follow me, she said gently, leading us away from the waiting room. With each step, apprehension twisted tighter around my throat. I was certain I wouldn't be able to handle whatever news awaited us. Each door we passed felt like a threshold to another universe, and I held my breath in anticipation, my heart racing. Your mother is stable, she began, the words clashing against the storm roiling in my chest. I clung to the hope that pierced through my despair. However, she's experiencing a lot of confusion. We're doing tests to comprehend the scope of the damage. It's healing, but recovery will take time. What can you tell us more? Aaron's voice trembled, breaking the fragile silence that enveloped us. The nurse hesitated, glancing down the long hallway before meeting our eyes. There is a chance she may remember some events but could also have difficulty processing complex thoughts. It's hard to predict how this will manifest over time. That I felt as if a cruel wind had sliced through the moment. I wanted to scream, I wanted to throw something. Memories of my mother, vibrant and full of life, began to flash before me. The way she danced in the kitchen, laughed from the depths of her soul, how she always seemed to know the perfect words to soothe every anguish. The thought of losing her vibrant self was unbearable. I felt the weight of this new reality settle heavily on my chest, squeezing until I fought for air. Can we see her? I managed to choke out, desperation crinkling my voice. Yes, but understand she may not react how you expect, the nurse cautioned, leading us to a small room at the end of the corridor. We stepped inside, and my breath caught in my throat. My mother lay pale against the stark white sheets, a ghost in a hospital bed. The steady hum of machines surrounded her, but the delicate rise and fall of her breaths told a far different story. I felt unmoored, staring at the woman who had always been my rock, fragile beneath the bright lights, as if life had stripped her of the essence I cherished. Mom? I stepped forward, Aaron sagging against the wall behind me. It's me. I'm here. I couldn't tell if she heard me. Her eyes flickered open, revealing a gaze that seemed lost between chemicals and consciousness. "Sweetheart?" she murmured hesitantly. Relief surged through me at the sound of her voice, yet the uncertainty lingered, shadowed by her confusion. "Yeah, it's me." I took her hand, squeezing it tightly, needing her to feel my warmth anchoring her to this moment. "We're here. Aaron's here too." Her eyes drifted to the corner where Aaron stood, uncertainty writhing within him. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice wavering. I exchanged a glance with Aaron, and the panic coursing in his gaze sent a chill down my spine. "You had a fall, Mom," I managed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You're in the hospital now that I don't remember." The admission crushed me, her confusion reflected in his worried eyes. "It's okay, you're safe," I said, my heart breaking at the uncertainty in her eyes, how effortlessly the threads of her life could unravel. "We're going to help you, Mom. You're going to get better. Together?" she repeated, her voice uncertain, as if grasping for threads that were slipping away. "Yes, together," I affirmed, feeling Aaron's tension grip my arm as we stepped closer to her bedside. "We'll help you every step of the way," but just then, something flickered in her gaze, a spark that sent my heart racing. "The message," she uttered abruptly, feigning clarity. "The fire in the attic, what?" I asked, leaning closer, hope colliding with confusion. "What fire?" Must tell you before her voice faded like a whisper on the wind, eyes drifting shut as she succumbed to the weight of her exhaustion. That I looked at Aaron, bewilderment lighting his face. What did she mean? "I don't know," he replied, panic swirling anew in our fragile world. "We need answers." "We need to," but before he could finish, the familiar, jagged sound of a phone notification broke through the haze. I fumbled in my pocket, hands shaking as I pulled out my phone, a text from Mom's old friend, "Clara, please come to my house as soon as possible. I have something you need to know." That a chill coursed through me as the implications settled heavily in my gut. What could she possibly mean? Aaron's eyes widened, reflecting the same fears brewing within me. "Should we go?" "Yes, we have to," I replied, but as I turned back to Mom, the weight of our impending leave pressed down on my heart. If she has information, if this is connected. I didn't finish that thought because I could already feel a tidal wave crashing over us, a compounding matter spiraling beyond what we could control. My mother's faded voice echoed in my mind, a dark thread woven into the uncertainty that stretched before us. The unknown had become a vast ocean, and in the depths, shadows loomed, whispers of things we never expected and consequences that would reshape our lives forever. As we turned to leave, each step carried the weight of a revelation still buried beneath layers of time, waiting for us to unearth the truth that might resurrect or ultimately destroy all we held dear. The faint light of the hallway flickered above us as I tried to catch my breath, my heart pounding in fear and anticipation. I glanced at Aaron, who was quiet, his eyes lost in thought, or perhaps grappling with the weight of unspoken fears. I had never felt so on edge. The air felt charged, like electricity before a storm. As we stepped outside into the evening chill, a gust of wind snatched at my hair and wrapped around me like a shroud. The mood had shifted, the hospital's starkness faded with the fading light, but the imprint of that room, the uncertainty and fear had followed me like a relentless shadow. Climbing into the passenger seat of Aaron's car, I tried to shake off the creeping dread that threatened to smother me. What if Clara knows something we want? Aaron finally broke the silence, his voice laced with concern as he gripped the steering wheel. "What if there's more going on here?" I sighed heavily, staring out the window as familiar sights blurred past. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, it's tied to Mom, and we can't ignore it." The weight of my mother's disorientation felt like a boulder lodged in my chest. Every isolated word she had uttered echoed in my mind. The fire? The attic? Was her past coming back to haunt us, or was it nothing more than the fragments of a confused mind? The drive was a quiet torment, each second stretching into an eternity, wrapped in unprocessed fears. I wanted to reach out and grab Aaron's hand, to quell this anxiety pooling between us, but unease stopped me. Instead, my eyes stayed glued to the sidewalk, watching pedestrians scatter like lost leaves in the wind. When we arrived at Clara's house, its warm lights glowed against the dim sky, a beacon of comfort compared to the storm raging inside us. I hesitated, the finality of stepping inside churning my stomach. "Are you ready?" Aaron's voice was barely a whisper as he turned to me, his brow furrowed. "That I don't know," I confessed. A part of me wanted to turn back, to ignore whatever news awaited because I feared it might shatter the fragile hope I had clung to, while the other part pushed me forward a desperate need for answers. With a quivering breath, I opened the door, the familiar smell of coffee and baked goods wrapping around us like a warm hug. Clara looked older, her graying hair framing her kind face, but her eyes held the same twinkle I remembered from childhood. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, ushering us into her cozy living room. The walls were decorated with family photographs, but none seemed to catch my eye as I felt the encroaching weight of urgency settle between us. "Clara, what is it?" I asked, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. My heart pounded in anticipation of the news I half dreaded, half hoped for. Clara motioned for us to sit, her expression severe. "It's about your mother," she started, her lips thinning as she leaned forward, almost conspiratorial. "What do you know?" Aaron pressed, his voice edged with impatience. I didn't want to bring this up in front of her, but Clara's voice faltered. "There were things she never told you, things from before. Secrets too dark to share." "Secrets?" I repeated, my pulse quickening. "What kind of secrets?" Clara paused, her hands trembling slightly as she tapped the table nervously. "Before her accident, your mother mentioned a fire in your grandfather's attic, a fire that destroyed a very important piece of history for your family." "The fire in the attic," I muttered, remembering my mother's words in that sterile hospital room. "What was it? What does it mean?" "Years ago, your mother discovered something there, but she never talked about it. She said it was dangerous to reveal." Clara's gaze alternated between me and Aaron, the gravity of her words wrapping around us, tightening its grip. "I always thought it was just family drama, but after your mother's accident I wondered if it wasn't just a story." "Tell us," Aaron urged, his frustration surfacing as he leaned forward. "What was it she found?" "A box," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A box with documents and something else. Something powerful." She was scared, afraid that someone would come looking for it. That's why she tried to keep it hidden. The air grew thick with secrets long buried. A shiver crawled down my spine as I caught Aaron's sideways glance, questions etched on his face. "What about now? Does she remember?" "If she's speaking of it, she must be realizing the connection," Clara replied. "But she also may not fully understand the danger. You may need to find that box, whatever it is, to protect your mother and your family." "Protect." The weight of that word, suddenly monumental, pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. "But where do we even start searching?" I gasped, feeling as if the weight of 2 lifetimes rested on my shoulders. Clara looked uncertain. "She might have mentioned something to you in passing. Check with your uncle, he might know more." My heart raced as a wave of recognition crashed over me. I had never had a close relationship with my uncle. He was a silhouette in the background of family gatherings, more often a subject of mystery than comfort. But this time, things would change. "Fine," I said, standing up. "Well, go to my uncle's." After a brief goodbye, urgency propelled me back to the car with Aaron, each heartbeat resounding in my ears like a war drum. The anticipation of facing the unknown bubbled beneath my skin. I turned to Aaron, who looked worried but resolute. "This could get complicated," he said. "That I know," I replied, my mind racing. "But if there's anything we can do to help." As the car sped down the roads bathed in silvery moonlight, I could feel the gravity of our endeavor closing in on us. What if uncovering her past would only lead to more chaos? If Clara was right, the very act of digging deeper may awaken things better left asleep, whether memories of a splintering family or darker forces that lurked beneath the surface. With every mile we traveled, the threads of my mother's hidden history pulled us further into a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. Memories mixed with fears, and as I glanced at Aaron, silent determination ignited in his eyes, a flickering flame amidst the encroaching darkness. But just as I was about to voice my growing fears, my phone buzzed again, vibrating insistently in my pocket. I fished it out, heart sinking at the sight of another message, a single word that knocked the wind from my lungs. "Run." Panic surged as adrenaline shot through me. "We need to go," I gasped, my voice barely containing the quake of urgency. What is it? Aaron's brow furrowed, and before I could respond, I felt my instincts kick in, a haunting realization dawning over this chaotic night. We were not just unearthing secrets but awakening something that could threaten lives, our own included. With terrified determination, we sped towards the unknown, a darkness and urgency pulling us onward, knowing that every moment brought us closer to an inevitable, terrifying truth. The world rushed past us in a blur as I grasped my phone tightly in one hand, the trembling urgency of that single word echoing in my mind. Run. My heart pounded in response, a wild drumbeat against the oncoming storm of uncertainty that wrapped around the evening like a noose, tightening with every breath. Alice, what is going on? Aaron's voice was urgent, a mixture of concern and determination, cutting through the panic rising within me. I could barely find my own voice to reply as fear spiraled into a nauseating tempest and my fingers shook as I attempted to type a response, but instead, I opted to call Claire, my heart racing as it rang on the other end. Each ring felt like a countdown, because whatever danger lurked in the shadows was clawing ever closer, and with each pulse of the clock, that heaviness loomed larger. When Clara finally picked up, her voice was laced with the tremors of fear I had heard so often that night. Alice? Is everything okay? Please, Clara. I got a message. It said to run. Is there something we need to know? My voice strained against the urgency, and I felt Aaron shift beside me. He was listening intently, the air thick with unspoken fears. That I am not sure what you mean, she replied, her voice taut with uncertainty. But if you feel threatened, you need to leave town. There are dangers linked to that box, to everything your mother kept hidden. People who would do anything to retrieve it. Who? I gasped, every nerve ending igniting with dread. Clara, we need answers. But the line went dead, and dread coursed through me like ice. What happened? Aaron asked, his eyes wide as I lowered the phone, heart feasting on fear. What did she say? Something is not right. She mentioned dangers, people who want something we don't understand yet, I managed to reply, the gravity of those words settling hauntingly between us. We need to warn Mom, Aaron said, voice strong despite wavering resolve. Yes. We have to go back. I agreed. The onset of panic echoed in my every thought, laced with the echo of unearthed secrets now threatening everything. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, an ominous shadow loomed, rippling behind us. Within an instant a flash of headlights, an unfamiliar vehicle barreled through the darkness, flanking our path and forcing relentless panic to pulse from my stomach. Get down! Aaron shouted, veering sharply to avoid the car skidding into our lane like an unrelenting predator. My heart raced, blood pounding furiously in my ears. That we can't let them. My words hung as the world outside turned chaotic. Tires screeched and the screeched asphalt groaned beneath the violence of our escape. My mind spiraled with all that had been uncovered: the fire in the attic, the box, the urgency of secrets, and now the threat we could scarcely fathom. Take the turn. I shouted, adrenaline igniting my senses. My next breath felt shaky, a wild combination of fear and urgent resolve. Where did you see Mom last? Back at the hospital, he replied, jaw tightened against disbelief. What if they're after her? No. I exclaimed, panic flaring in response. We can't let that happen. The thought of losing Mom felt grounding to my resolve, igniting flames of protection in my heart. Faster, as Aaron raced toward the hospital, the car seemed to hum with energy, vibrating with the intensity of our desperate purpose. But the menacing car was still on our tail, bad intentions sparkling in the headlights, chasing down every facade of safety we thought we had. Alice, I can't lose you. Aaron shouted, determination anchoring his resolve as he glanced my way, fear shimmering in his eyes. No one is getting lost tonight. I promised, my heart clenching in solidarity. Panic screamed against the edges of my clarity. We will protect each other. Just as we neared the hospital, the reality of our emotions collided with the urgency of the moment. The headlights behind us cut stark shadows across the asphalt like the gesturing hands of the pasta waiting darkness with bloody echoes begging to be remembered. We're almost there. Just push through. I encouraged, grounding my thoughts against the chaos. Suddenly, the world shifted as Aaron yanked the car into the hospital lot, wheels screeching against the gravel-lined entrance. The moment Wed arrived, a horrifying realization struck. The entrance was blockaded, a gathering of strangers clustered near their vehicles, watching ominously. What do we do? I faltered, dread pressing down as the air grew charged with ominous presence. Something dark was rising, creeping through unfelt cracks in the heart of our family legacy, there. Aaron pointed toward the ER doors, determination anchoring him. Our best chance is making it inside. We bolted from the car, hearts racing in sync, urgency mingling with the fear that nipped at our heels as we sprinted through the hospital entrance. The quick buzz of fluorescent lights lit the way, the smell of antiseptic sharp in my lungs. But our minds were desperate, yearning for solace, for safety. As we burst through the lobby, we began frantically searching for Mom, every heartbeat counting toward the urgency of knowing she was safe. Mom. The world around us turned madly vague as we dodged past startled nurses, rushing toward the rooms where familiarity mingled with trepidation. What if they come for her? Aaron asked, voice raw and edged with worry. They won't. We need to trust she's safe. I assured him, even as fear radiated deep within my stomach, our mad rush echoing the hurried whispers of secrets still buried. At last, we reached the small room where we had left her. The door hung slightly ajar, the faint sound of soft murmurs filtering into the hallway. My heart lurched, the tremor of emotions I had fought to hold at bay surged like a tidal wave. Alice, help. Aaron said that. I pushed the door open further, gasping at the sight before us. The once still room was spiraled into chaos, my mother writhing weakly on the bed, eyes wide with confusion, while that familiar silhouette, the one that had shadowed our past, stood by her side, whispering fiercely, fingers gripping her arm too tightly. Our uncle. No. I cried, frantic panic coursing, body surging forward, arms outstretched to protect Mom. Get away from her. In that instant, the world felt suspended, locked in the weight of time, as Aaron rushed forward, fury igniting the air between our uncle and us, the specter materializing from shadows we had chased for far too long. Get your hands off her. Aaron shouted, adrenaline fueling our resolve as I climbed beside him defiantly, my gut churning with protectiveness and insistence. Our uncle turned slowly, glared with rage, seconds stretching thick between us, their eyes flickering like so many ghosts past. He opened his mouth, words forming but lost in the tumult of that moment where uncertainty, fear, and resolve collided. I just want to help her. He shot back, but desperation had replaced conviction, doubts blooming. She needs to understand. No. I gasped, stepping closer to Aaron, our implicit unity shielding Mom. She doesn't know the truth, and she doesn't need to hear it from you. You're the one who hid away in your own darkness. The truth escaped my lips like the calm before a storm, shocking all of us. It's not that simple. There are dangerous people who will come for her, for the secrets she carries. Our uncle shot back, a frantic motion betraying his crack in conviction. Then let's face them. Together, I implored, urgency propelling my voice as I felt the fraying edges of our shared family legacy beginning to unravel. Alice, you don't know what you're asking. He argued, voice strained against the reality of his own past, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes, a glimmer of hope tangled in the spirals of chaos. Mom's face shifted, confusion lacing her brow as she looked between us, struggling to make sense of the unfolding storm. What is happening? Her voice floated, faint yet shining through the turmoil like a shimmering ray of light. Mom, you're safe. We're here, I promised, reaching for her hand, squeezing it tightly to anchor her, an unshakable reminder that we stood together against the storm. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a nurse rushed in, breathless. What's happening in here? She barked, her presence jolting the room back to the present. We just need to protect our mother. Aaron stepped forward, voice steadying and brimming with resolve, the flickering embers of hope igniting his words. We're here to face the truth with her. That's all we need right now. As the nurse looked around, absorbing the tension, Mom's voice cut through the chaos once more, more certain this time. Help me remember. Help me face whatever past is still hidden. I can't run from it anymore. In that moment, a silence washed over us like the ocean tide retreating from the shore, revealing all the buried remnants of what could and should be. What was darkened within our family history could finally be confronted. We were gathering the strength we would need. I squeezed Mom's hand, looked deep into Aaron's eyes, and felt the fire raging within, full of passion, of truth, of the blood ties knitting us closer with each heartbeat. Amidst uncertainty, we had each other. ready to dive into whatever secret loomed beneath the surface. In that heart-stirring silence, I whispered what I needed to be true: together, even against the shadows, we will shine. We will. And as we clung to that hope, I realized that we were finally poised on the edge of truth, not fearing the shadows lurking below, but daring to confront them, readying ourselves for the clarity we had long sought. In embracing the darkness, we could finally lay claim to the light.